This is The Difference Makers, a Paladin Security podcast. Each week, we take you inside the world of security for a first-hand look at the inner workings of the industry. But it's about more than just protecting property and manning events. It's about going above and beyond to make the world a safer and friendlier place.
Welcome to The Difference Makers. I'm Christina Haydanis. Well, taking care of your mental health and well-being is so important in this day and age, as we have a lot of stressors in our everyday life, from work to family and even money. That's why we're doing a two-part series on the subject to help encourage people to talk about it. Tom Taggart is this month's guest, and he knows a thing or two about the topic. He's an operations manager in Halifax for Paladin Security, and today gets raw and real, sharing his struggles with mental health. Over the years, he's found a way to manage it, and even has a few tips for others. Thanks for joining me, Tom. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I wanted to start by asking about your journey with Paladin Security. Did you start as a security officer?
So I started with Paladin in October of 2011. I was working on a contract with a different company that Paladin won, and I turned over with Paladin as a shift supervisor at a hospital here in Halifax. And over the years, grown to a site supervisor at one of the largest hospitals in Atlantic Canada. I was a field manager for the branch here for a bit. I was client service manager, operations manager, provincial healthcare lead, and then director of healthcare, and now kind of doing a lot of the same stuff here in Toronto. And I still do some work up in Newfoundland with those folks up there with Eastern Health, and done a fair amount of work in the past with Paladin Security when they were first getting started up across a bunch of different states. And yeah. So
did your security career start with Paladin, or did you have experience in the security business before?
Yeah, no, I'd been doing security for a year and a half or so before I turned over to Paladin. Probably more than that, actually. Hospital security about a year and a half. I did like events and stuff like that prior to. Took a community college course at the local college here for law and security with an aim to kind of branch into corrections eventually, but just kind of fell in love with security, and apparently I'm good at it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you definitely are. So tell me a little bit about the security industry. Like, what drew you into it?
Honestly, I just fell into it initially. Like I said, I had an aim to get into corrections. Security, I thought, was more of a stepping stone for me. I was in the, manual labor field for a long time. I worked in forestry, and I laid hardwood floors and worked in a bunch of different lumber mills, and I just needed a change. And I thought something in law enforcement, probably corrections, and I saw security as kind of like a means to an end at that time. And once I got in, especially not so much the event security, I didn't really enjoy that too much, but the healthcare aspect of it, and seeing the profound difference that you can make even as an individual security officer in the lives of some of the patients, and seeing, how they, come in, usually at their worst, and they leave and they're thanking people. They're even thanking you in some cases. And, even though we're not part of the direct care team, we still play an active role in, assisting them and having the best inpatient care experience possible.
Was that the main reason why you connected with healthcare, or was there more to it for you?
No, for me, I think that was kind of the main reason. And I was blessed very early on in my career to be introduced. I was still a shift supervisor, I think, at the time, to Don McAllister. And for some reason, Don, I don't know if he saw something in me or if he just liked talking to me, but he imparted a lot of knowledge on me, and it really broadened my understanding of, security in general, but more specifically healthcare security, and how deep the impacts that a security program can make on an organization. It was astounding, and I owe a lot to that man.
Wow. Now, you have been open about struggles with mental health. Can you just tell me a little bit about that and what kind of what you have gone through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably took me a longer time to come to grips with, what was going on with me, than it should have. Like, I grew up in a very, very, very small village, and nobody really talked about their feelings or their struggles, and it was kind of like a taboo thing. And I guess I knew something wasn't right. I kind of like internally came to terms with it before I actually went and got help. I was working in like mental health facilities and psychiatric hospitals, and conversing with clinical staff and seeing folks come in, and I was like, oh, jeepers, like that's, a lot of this sounds like stuff that I go through. And I just kind of lived in denial for a bit until eventually, it got to the point where I couldn't function anymore. I was having anxiety attacks while I was driving for no reason. I was constantly sad and like down, and I didn't see a way to dig myself out of a hole. I started shutting out like a lot of close friends and family, and just like, I don't know how to put it other than suffering. And, I finally, went to see my doctor, and, he made some referrals, and we did a bunch of like, I don't know, evaluations or whatever. And came to find out that I had, what you would call anxiety and depression. And I was like, kind of, part of me was relieved because, he was going to help me get through it with some medication and stuff like that. But the other part of me was still kind of like ashamed, like I felt broken, and that like maybe it would affect my job, my life. But I mean, honestly, it couldn't be further from the case. Once I started talking about it with my employer, and being open that way, Paladin's been supportive of me, and anytime I do have issues, and there was times when I did need some time away from work, and then I found that talking about it openly with some of the, like, I would do a lot of the onboarding training out here in Halifax, and when I was trying to show people that it's not the one flew over the cuckoo's nest version of mental illness that we see in the movies. It can be anybody. So I'd go through a whole day of teaching and talking about illness and different situations and scenarios to people to try and wrap their head around it. And then closer to the end of the day, and I'd come up and I'd say, listen, it can happen to anybody. In fact, I'm somebody that suffers every single day. I manage it. It's usually pretty good. Sometimes I have some flare-ups, but if you were to go through this whole day and I didn't tell you that, would you have ever guessed it? And they would all just, no, absolutely not. And it would generate a lot of discussion, and really, it provided more of like a human element to it for a lot of people. And I think it was beneficial for them. And I had people come up to me, after the fact, and say, I really appreciate you being open and honest about that. This is something that I struggle with. And, I try not to advertise it because I'm worried about, what people might think, but to see you and to see you being successful and, happy and all this stuff, it gives me a lot of hope. And that really is something that was so rewarding to me.
That's amazing. Why do you think there is still that stigma that you said, you were embarrassed by it at first? And like, why do you think that stigma is out there that, you're embarrassed by it immediately? You don't want to talk about it, or you're scared what other people are going to say?
I think we're all a product of our environment, right? And like for me, I mentioned I grew up in that small community, and it was, like I said, it's taboo. And then, the media shoves down, or they used to, I shouldn't say they do in some instances, shoves this image of what a man needs to be down your throat, the kind of John Wayne, Clint Eastwood facade image. And, even though, they'd have like, no, let's talk, or, let's get rid of the stigma and stuff like that. It was like, yeah, but do you really want to do that? Like, do I really want to, come out and say this? Are people, going to think, I'm less of a person or whatever, which has been the opposite of the case, but it's still something that's just so, if you never know, like if you never experience, different cultures, then you don't know that you don't know that they exist, and you're ignorant to it. And if you never experienced, what it's like to be open and transparent about mental health, then you don't know what it's like to, really have that, blanket of support that you do get from most people. Like I've never met anybody in my entire life since I've kind of become open about this that has been rude or disrespectful or said, "Oh, you're crazy," or anything like that. Couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. Was there an incident that happened or something that happened or anything that kind of started the anxiety or triggered depression or anything like that? Or did it just kind of, happen with as you grew up or as you were moving on in life?
I think for the most part of like the early stages, it was like it was kind of like a slow burn. There was definitely one sentinel event that happened a number of years ago that really pushed me over the edge, but that's not really my story alone to tell. But as recently as this year, to be honest, with the pandemic that happened, and me being away from home and family and things, that I moved to Toronto the day before they locked everything down, and being in a new city, and I'm really family oriented, and in April, just after I'd got up there, they had the mass shooting down home, and that's like the community that I grew up in, so I knew a lot of those people. And then normal work stress you can normally handle, but when you don't, like, we're social beings, like humans, and we need interaction and interface. We need community, and I wasn't, work was great, but I wasn't really getting that. And then I guess towards the end of November, our branch manager out here in Halifax passed away, and quite suddenly, and that was like almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was down and out, and it was like nothing, I could feel it building, but it was more just like a slap in the face. And then all of a sudden I couldn't function. And I knew that, I'd been neglecting my own self-care for too long at that point. And I needed to take a step back and readjust and reset and put some controls in place. It's funny. You don't really think it's bad until it's really bad. I find with this, it's like, no, it's just another crappy day, or, oh, it's another crappy day, or, oh, it's another crappy day. And you just kind of go with it because you have obligations and responsibilities. And for me, the last, this time and the time before, it really has taken that one large sentinel event to push me down the rabbit hole, I guess, for lack of better words.
Now, at this time, it sounds like you kind of understood, like you said, the triggers or kind of where you're at. But in the first time that it happened, when did you know, like, you kind of explained it earlier, but when did you know that, like, it was kind of that you really needed help, or that it wasn't normal for you, or you weren't happy, and that you kind of, I don't want to say hit rock bottom, that you knew that you needed help?
Oh, hit rock bottom is definitely a good way to put that. And that's what it was. Like, I would come into work and I'd struggle to get through the workday. My hands would always be like wet and clammy, and I'd be shaking, and I'd get home, and I would self-medicate with alcohol, and just that was my every single day. And like one day I kind of like woke up and I was like, this isn't right. This isn't how you function. This isn't how you live your life. Like, you need to do something. And I did.
And so what do you do every day right now, or every week or whatever to help yourself?
Different things depending on the time of year. Like, I'm really outdoorsy. So like for me, just getting out and for a hike, getting into the woods and into nature is really great for me. I do, it's just going to sound silly, but if I'm really stressed, or I can't think, or if I'm starting to like feel anxious or upset, I'll take like a 10-minute break, and I'll go do a crossword, honestly. And it, like, I can focus on that, and I'm not focusing on anything else, the things that like trigger my anxiety or make me feel down, like everything else goes away. And I make sure I take that good 10 minutes and I'll do that crossword. And then I can come back and I can be focused, and I go back to, plugging away at stuff. I also like doing things with my hands. I was in a men's support group for a while, and they were talking about meditation. And I was like, I don't know how to meditate. But then, like, later on, I was talking about, asking me what I did in the weekend. And, I was like, well, I tore apart my dad's car, and he's got a Prius. So it's got one of those electric things that I've never worked with, like those big batteries before. But I was in there and I was, cranking on things and shocking myself and doing all kinds of horrible stuff. And, but like, I was like, it felt good at the end of the day. Like, I felt like accomplished when I put it all back together, and I wasn't stressed or thinking about anything. And the guy that was leading the group, he was like, that's basically meditation, dude. Like, that's the whole concept, is like to take yourself away from like the everything else that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's so true, because that is exactly it. It's just a different form. Instead of sitting still and, thinking in your head, you're doing something else that gets your mind off of it. So, what would you say has been your proudest moment when it comes to your mental health?
Proudest moment. Getting the opportunity, like I mentioned with the training aspect, with that, and I've done some other public speaking venues where I've talked, maybe not specifically about mental health, but it's come up, and getting the chance to be open about it, and knowing that through that I'm helping other people feel more confident in themselves, and having their own ability to get help when they need it. It's been to see other people come through and come to me, like even years later, they've said, I really appreciate, talking to you, even if it wasn't like a public speaking venue, just talking to somebody. You said this, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. You would say this, and it really triggered something in me, and I went and got help, and like I'm so grateful to you. And like, I don't mean to say that to toot my own horn or anything, but that's been like the greatest thing, is, knowing that I'm impacting other people positively.
Yeah, I love that. So would that kind of be your message to others, or do you have a message to others about, the importance of speaking up also?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to tell people to speak up if that's their own choice. Like, if people, don't feel comfortable with it, then I'm okay with it. My biggest message to people is, just love everybody and be accepting, and understand that just because someone's acting a certain way, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. We have all these stressors in our lives, and whether you suffer from mental health issues or addiction or whatever that may be, or you don't, the things that go on around us in our lives, they affect you different than anybody else. We're all unique. And I can be having a bad day because of XYZ, and I might come across rude or short, or like I'm not paying attention to you, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. These are behaviors, and it's the behavior isn't a representation of the person. The same way as mental health is not a representation of who a person is at their core. Like You wouldn't say to somebody, you're cancer, but people say, oh, you're depressed, right? And it's separating the illness from the individual. I think that's the biggest thing, and just, not taking things personally, and like I said, spreading love. If we all did that, and we all just kind of like didn't get mad at people for, not being around or saying something inappropriate, and we just kind of took that in stride, because at the end of the day, it's not your fault, and it's not anybody's fault.
Yeah, well said. Now, I want to ask about a period in your life where you were homeless, and as I understand it, security was a bit of a solace for you.
When I was first, like, very young in security, it's not a very high-paying industry, at least out here. Things are changing very slowly, but when you're kind of at the ground level, the income isn't the greatest. And I was in a pretty bad living situation with other people that were also struggling financially, and we couldn't pay our rents and stuff like that. And we ended up getting evicted, and I spent a fair amount of time in my truck, sleeping in my truck, and I would take a bunch of shifts because I knew if I was working, I'd be inside someplace, and the facility that I was working at the time, had a shower and a gym and stuff like that. So I just sleep in my truck and I'd go to work, and whenever they needed somebody, I was there, and I'd go to work. But I do remember thinking, like, I never want to be in this situation ever again. Like I kind of, in my mind, I saw like two options. I said I can quit everything and start over and move home with family, because they would have taken me for sure. It's not like they were like, oh no, you're on your own. Or I can work my butt off to get a promotion and to achieve whatever I need to achieve to, make more money or whatever that is. And that's what I did. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. And I for that, like, I guess that is, like, for me, like a huge life lesson, in the sense that when I look back at all of the things that I thought in the moment, I didn't think I'd ever crawl out of those, ruts or holes or whatever it is, because it was so bad. Those are like really the defining moments of my life, where if I had taken option B instead of option A, I don't know where I would be. And I think if I had taken that easy option, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am today, in all aspects of my life, career-wise, personally, that sort of thing. I think struggle is good, and I think it's good no matter whether you suffer from mental health issues or not. And I think that's what really, makes you stronger. I use an analogy like, when you break bones, or you have a lot of trauma to, like, your body, like, so boxers, they have these big old mitts, where they, it's just repeated trauma to the same area over and over and over again. And they get bigger, they get harder. There's calcium deposits. Same way with your skin. When you cut yourself really bad, you end up with a scar. A scar is, hard tissue, because your body's identified as something that's weak, and it doesn't want that to happen to it again. I think your mind functions very similarly, where, if you experience these traumas, these mental traumas, and all of a sudden, your body's identified that, and it builds this wall of protection around you, and you develop, new skills or new ways of thinking or motivation or whatever that is to, protect yourself from having to feel that way.
Are you surprised by how tough you are now that you look back at everything you've kind of gone through and come out on the other side?
Yeah. I mean, I still don't think I'm as tough as I could be, but, definitely, like, looking back at some of the stuff that's gone on in my life, like, I think if I had to experience that, in my younger years, I might have broke me. Do you know what I mean? But, I kind of, for the most part now, there's obviously days that don't go quite as well as others. But I think for the most part, I kind of have an attitude where I try not to let a whole lot of stuff get to me. Like, something, obviously if you lose a loved one, that's different. That's a pain that you can't really shut off. But, you miss out on a contract, or one of your star employees quits suddenly or something like that. And it's just like, oh, geez, that sucks. But, still have to keep working, still got to do stuff. You still have a job to do. You still got to persevere and move forward. If something doesn't work out, there's another opportunity down the road. I'm kind of like a cat, and I always land on my feet. I might fall, I might do stupid stuff, but I always land on my feet, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's amazing. And I know we're hoping to help other people, like you were saying, that maybe are going through something similar, or have gone through something similar. And I know hearing your story will help with that. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to The Difference Makers. In our next episode, we talk to an officer who works in a healthcare setting and deals with mental health patients daily.